Anti-Tyranny. You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill.
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Sorry, but having some issues. I think I got a channel that needs cleaned out on my board. I think that's why I've been having some problems. I got a couple channels on this board that I think this whole thing needs pulled apart and cleaned up. But thank you for joining me this evening again here on UCY.TV. This is Anti-Tyranny News Radio, and I'm your host, Josh. Tonight, first half, I kind of want to get into Common Core, the public education, this whole issue we have right now, and I think it's really going to hurt the youth and the future. And this is something that we have to, we'll have to change what we're doing, and we're going to have to counteract it. And I think homeschooling, private if you can afford it, homeschooling if you can have that time to do that and afford to be able to do that. But I honestly, I don't see us fixing the public education system. I really don't. We do need to try to stop every measure that they're trying to enact that basically is turning these into re-education facilities, basically little government boot camps is what I like to call them. They're not there to truly educate, to make young people intelligent thinkers. They really are there to sway them. What's intelligent thinkers? People that come to their own conclusions. Research, look at all the different sides of an issue from, in a way, an ignorant viewpoint. And even when I look at an issue, I have to question what I believe I know. When I look at things, I have to take myself back to that ignorance. I'm looking at all the facts that are laid out by every side out there. And I'm going, well, this, there's evidence to back this, there's evidence to back this, there's evidence to back this. Might not be able to come up to a conclusion, yes, this was a conspiracy by these people and this is exactly how they did it. But I can say, well, these people are not being truthful at all and deceptive. These people are questioning, bringing up things, and some of them are valid, some of them are speculatory, but are they Are they doing it in a deceitful way? And there's ones out there that they might point out one or two facts, but then the rest of what they push are based off of fiction, and they're doing it in a deceptive way. That's propaganda. It might be propaganda against propaganda, but it's still propaganda. And, you know, that's why we really have to start at a younger age and get people really to be free thinkers, to be able to educate themselves in a way. Teach them to self-educate. We shouldn't be propagandizing. We should be like, well, what's your belief? How do you come to that conclusion? Then bring up facts. Well, you know, well, here's some facts that might counteract your conclusion. Do you have facts that'll counteract maybe my conclusion? And then you also create a society that we can actually talk about issues and it not just be a fight. A lot of times you see more people that they absolutely cannot have just a down-to-earth debate or conversation about an issue and have different viewpoints. When they start seeing those different viewpoints, they completely just come unhinged. They want to fight you over it. And it's like, really? I do have one. Let me sit here and find it. I shouldn't have any problems because I did download these. And this one was from Adam Kokesh. It was with Charlotte Iserby, and a lot of people know her from Dumbing Down of America, and you know, these attacks on the youth are just, it's nothing new, and it's something that is basically out in the open now. It's not questioned. There's a lot of people out there, they send their kid to school going, oh, they'll be educated. That's the right way to educate. We should conform and not be free thinkers and not question what we're told. Well, if you're not questioning what you're told, how are you going to discover new things? How are you going to be able to answer the things out there that are unanswered? Because if you're not thinking of new ideas that could explain things, because you're conforming, then you're not going to get answers to the unknowns. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. Here we go.
Right. Any government agency with any kind of name, you know, you have to analyze it from, well, what is the real meaning of this? What is behind it? And it usually ends up being the exact opposite of the words being used to describe the agency. So the fact that there's an Office of Educational Research and Improvement sounds kind of scary. What was the actual intent of this office?
Well, that's a very important office that develops all of the curriculum and teacher training, and is connected with all the laboratories and centers all over the country that create your local education agency's activities. Everything came out of my office. That's what I'm trying to say. But the reason I found it so fascinating is what I had lived through it as a local school board member before I went in. And I knew that any federal money, I always knew that because I could see at the local level, all the federal money came in, had nothing to do with academics. And so I saw that. But then when I got into the very office where the programs that I'd been suffering under as a school board member, identifying them, I got into the very office where these programs were being developed. And I went through the grants and contracts, and I saw all of the abstracts and what the purpose was. And the purpose was never academic education. Please, folks, look, let me tell you this, Adam. There are a lot of parents out there, and they're really good, and I admire them, and it's good. They finally woke up to something in education. They woke up to Common Core, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's like when it finally got so bad as Common Core, they realized they had to do something.
Yes, but they do not understand that they could kill 1 million communist cores, I call it.
Uh-huh.
We've had that ever since the 1960s in different versions. The only difference now is the computer to teach and assess. That's very dangerous, and we could go into that later, but we don't have enough time. But the important thing is that there's absolutely nothing new about this. The U.S. Department of Education is what they should be focusing on. Now, Ronald Reagan promised to bring down the U.S. Department of Education in 1979. That was his campaign promise to get elected. And he did not do it. And he could have done it, and I don't accept for 1 second the neoconservative Trotskyites' excuses. Oh, he couldn't do it. It wasn't his fault. Yes, it was.
Well, you're calling Reagan a neo-Trotskyite.
I do. I call him worse than that. Because he is responsible for what those poor parents, they think Common Core is the important thing. No. He didn't bring down the U.S. Department of Education. He could have. Without the U.S. Department of Education, there would be no Communist Core.
So
that's the head of the octopus.
Well, a lot of people, despite the fact that Reagan was the least Reaganist president, he cut and run, he negotiated with terrorists, he raised taxes, passed gun control, he got divorced. The hypocrisy is as bad as with any American president. But to identify his ideology as neo-Trotskyitism, how does that relate to the intent behind education policy?
Well, education, let me point this out. From 1934, when the Carnegie Corporation wrote a little blue book called Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies, to this moment right now, Carnegie and Rockefeller and the tax-exempt foundations have done everything possible to change America's economic system to a planned economy. That's what the restructuring, that Communist Core, school to work, is all about.
And you have to dumb people down into being obedient workers in order to have that centrally planned economy.
That's exactly it. And then you asked me about Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. Well, he signed the agreements with the Soviet Union, Gorbachev in 1985, that merged the two education systems. The Carnegie Corporation agreement was just as bad. They signed an agreement with the Soviet Academy of Science that called for joint development of critical thinking. That's Marxist thinking for early elementary school children. Now, the parents fighting Common Core, they don't know any of this history. If they knew this history, they wouldn't be fighting Communist Core. They would be demanding, instead of in every state going to their legislatures to repeal Communist Core, they would be demanding that the United States Department of Education be abolished.
Absolutely.
Then you would have no problem.
Absolutely.
There would be no problem at all. But both the left and the right are in bed on this. Let me point this out.
Well, hold on a second. I just want to get clear on the terms here. When you say both the left and the right, you mean the Republicans, the Democrats, and all of their statist ideologies, they all have an interest in some form of a centrally planned economy, and their educational policy or attitude is dictated by that.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And interestingly enough, I would say their agendas are almost identical. We've got to understand that. I always say, at the end of an interview, someone will say to me, or early on, they say, Charlotte, if the lights go out, what's the one thing that's most important for Americans to understand? And I say that both parties are the same at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not Charlotte talking, this is Carroll Quigley. He said it in 1898 or something. He talked about, he wrote about it in his book, Tragedy and Hope, and he talked about the industrialists in 1898. Who got together and said, we've got to control both parties at the top in order to get this global international system in.
Mm-hmm.
This has been planned for many, many years. And we're at the end of the line right now. And that's why I say, don't waste time. When I look at those great parents out there, they're fighting and they have every right to be. I'm not saying they don't. They found out something was very rotten in Denmark. But they act like dental technicians. They got their little, steel thing working in the teeth, like the dentist does when you go to have your teeth cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
Every standard, they're checking on. I said, look, stop it. These standards were developed in 1970 out of my office. And the goals collection out of the Northwest Regional Lab. The national assessment is Carnegie all the way through. You've got to do your history, parents. And once you get the history, you are going to know that the only way you can solve this problem is through getting rid of the U.S. Department of Ed and returning education totally to the local level. Now, people are going to say, oh, but why not? Why can't we have school choice and charter schools? I say, you can have school choice, but the school choice, am I still on with you up there?
Yes, you're right. It's almost a silly proposition. It's like, can't we have school choice as a federal policy? It's like, no, if you have no federal policy, you just have more choice.
Well, the thing is that the school choice they're talking about is tax funded.
Right.
And that means that's not school choice, that's federal. That means you're controlled by the government. You can't have any form of school choice that is tax funded will not be school choice. The old school choice is you have to pay. You pay out of your hard-earned money. The minute you take a penny of tax money, you are going to be controlled. And that is the goal at the international level, to get all human beings into the computer, the global computer, and because of the school, the lifelong learning, limited learning for lifelong labor. For all Americans, I even have something out of the National Alliance of Business says kindergarten through age 80, workforce training. Now, this is community education. Everything will be under the umbrella of the school district. All the services, abortion clinics, workforce training, leisure, everything. Lifelong. This is very scary, folks. And I told this with, what's his name? The other guy, Rutkowski or whatever. I said this down at the Long Island Forum. If there's anything Americans have got to understand, it's that the agenda they're looking at now, they're just seeing part of it. And I saw this in my own office. I have all the documents. The plan is to put the United States under world government into regions, all the regions together. Regionalism is communism, right? So, and everything that we do in our lives right now will be controlled underneath the school district, and there will be no elected boards, unelected council form of government. That is the Soviet system. And I wish we had more time to talk about it, but I'm all over the internet on this.
Right. Well, I want to ask you two last questions here, and the first one is, you've been at this for a long time, sounding the alarm. How has the reception been, and do you think the mainstream is hearing this message?
Well, mainstream media? No. You, great guys, yes, and the young people. My generation, forget them. Even my children's generation almost forget them. The baby boomers, they're hopeless. But I see, and maybe they're going to save the United States, because if they don't do it, the young people, it's curtains. It's very serious right now. I think they, in quotes, who've been trying to get this in for 100 years now, They planned to take us down in 1976. That was the Declaration of Interdependence. Right? In 1976, and 125 members of Congress voted for that. So that shows how rotten they are in Congress.
Well, right, hold on. You mentioned young people, and it's really exciting to see now how in the age of the internet, a lot of young high school students, middle school students are recording their teachers, are actively protesting, are doing this research, and they're starting to understand the system that they're in. From all of your research, is there anything that you have learned in particular that you want to share, or any message that you have to kids that are in this system right now, or to the parents that are going, well, I can't afford to, or I don't have the time to homeschool or unschool? What's your practical message to those individuals in those situations?
Those of us who developed the 8-disc set, Exposing the Global Road to Ruin Through Education, people can get that at Charlotte Iserby YouTube channel, okay? We put all the discs up free because it's very late, and we sell it at Amazon too, but all the discs are up there free. So they should watch 18 hours of videotaped presentations by leading American researchers and public school teachers in the trenches for the past 50 years. Go there, Charlotte Iserby YouTube channel. Now, what I wanted to say to these young people and parents, you cannot accept the school choice agenda. It's lethal. The tax-funded school choice agenda is lethal because that's the international system. Once you take the money, if homeschoolers take it, private school, charter schools are lethal anyway. They're tax-funded without an elected school board. Now, all these entities will be without elected school boards. They're all going to be taking tax money. If you don't have an elected school board, you can't go and complain. So that's the beginning of the devolution of our elective form of government, which is very, very serious because, as I said, the goal, and I've got the papers, the goal is to put us under unelected councils lifelong. It's the Chinese communist system, and it was admitted to be such by a community educator in 1976 at a conference in Washington, D.C., when a community educator asked, what is this you're talking about? And he said, it's the Chinese communist system modeled on the Soviet system. We have to bring down the Department of Education and all state departments of education and go back to pre-1965 with locally elected boards, picking our teachers very carefully, nothing but academics, none of this fluffy values destroying of these programs. I have the proof out of the Guidance Counselors Journal where they said that all of these drug ed, sex ed, and all these other programs, the goal of them was not to get kids off drugs or off sex or anything else. The goal was just the opposite. That's why we have so many problems in this country. They use those programs to get our children in trouble, to bring down the moral fabric of our country.
Hold on.
I've got to move back.
I've never heard it put that simply, but nothing explains it like that. Because you've heard this described, that the mentality of a teenager is you tell them not to do something, they have to go out and try it. So why is the government teaching kids about drugs and sex? Well, duh. It's sort of like, and I do believe that there is an important role for drug and sex ed, but I certainly don't trust the government to have anything to do with it. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us and for that perspective. Where can people find out more about your work, other than your YouTube channel, which you mentioned, and your website is, we will include in the links here.
Yes, deliberatedumbingdown.com, and that quote is in there from the guidance counselors, if you want to look it up, the quote where they said, we will use death education to change the children's values towards death and dying the same way we use sex education to change their values towards sex and various sexual practices. That is a direct quote.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Really appreciate it, and thank you so much for joining us today. Man, were you saying that people should be shot for passing out those...
So there's Charlotte Iserby. And, she knows what she's talking about when it comes to this. And, things like sex ed and drug education, well, it's to stop kids from, doing these things. We show them in first grade what cocaine and marijuana look like, because that'll stop them from doing it. These kids are looking at the stuff like, what is it? What does it do? People eat it and smoke it and sniff it and what? It makes you see things. That'll become cool. Yeah, well, you look at the sex ed. You know, people are like, well, you know, we need to teach these kids this stuff that way. If they do have sex, they have safe sex and blah, 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 blah. It's to stop them or prevent them from, you know, getting pregnant while they're in school. And what's it evolved to now? You got where they're trying to teach them bestiality and all these other horrendous type things you would not want a little kid or even a young teenager to know about. They want to teach to them. And there's plenty of so-called experts that have suggested that we should start teaching them these sexual education things, even bestiality, at a extremely you know young age in elementary or something. Basically, like what they were doing with the DARE program, they were, you know, first graders getting taught what cocaine and stuff is and how to huff paint, sniffing glue, what marijuana is. First graders didn't know what the stuff was, probably would never went around it for a long time to even experiment, except they were being taught what it was in first grade. Just look at the public school system. It's not about education, it's about point systems. It's about funding. Federal funding, which puts them under mandates. To receive this federal funding, you agree to go by these standards and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, nullify this stuff. We have to start nullifying the agencies to make it illegal for those agencies to basically operate within that state. We have to start scaling it back to states. Now, I'm for self-governance, but we have to start somewhere to basically get it away from where we are now, where we have a centralized, not really only federal, but even worldwide, you know, the United Nations, basically controlling everything. And we also need other countries within the United Nations to understand that that's corrupt. And when they need a new enemy, well, just because you're a part of the United Nations doesn't mean you won't become the next one. Oh, we don't agree with what you're doing. Look at the United States. Do we not have enough, you know, YouTube videos of police brutality out there that they could, if they needed to, they could go, hey, well, now the United States is, humanitarian problem over there. They got these officers running around beating citizens, so now we need sanctions on the United States. Who do you think that's going to hurt? Is that going to hurt the elitists in this country? Or is that going to hurt you and me? Where's the hurt going to come down? In these other countries, well, they have sanctions and the people in power remain in power. People live in squalor. And well, in some cases, the people might rise up finally against that dictator, but they're running to the same people that caused a lot of the problems in the first place. Not saying that police brutality is right, but sanctions on a country that end up hurting the little people is not right either. It's up to the people to take care of their own problems. Sanctions and all this BS that goes on with the United Nations is just crap. And one thing I've noticed in a lot of schools, you hear about magnet schools. This is a magnet school for computer science, understanding computers. All these kids get to take computers home. Now tablets. I happen to be in a school for half of a year that was a magnet school for computers. But most of my elementary year, I was in a school that was considered a magnet school for earth science. And what do you think that entailed? This entailed basically talking about the climate and things we have to do to save the world because we're killing it. This was the early propaganda. It's nothing new. This is why I tell people, you have to understand that by buying into that system, you basically are perpetuating the problem. And I know that there's people out there that they're stuck in a situation where they don't see a way to get their kids out of public school. But I urge people that are able, that have that opportunity to do what they can to get them out of this system that's really nothing more than a brainwashing institute. And that's what public schools started out. The whole federalizing of the public school system, the Department of Education, all this was done knowing that what it was to do was conform the nation in the name of making us all equal. And while with Common Core coming in, it's to make everyone is equally dumb. Of course, the funding comes from the Bill Gates, which also, plays with the depopulation vaccines over there in Africa. His dad was a eugenist. Just saying. There's a real issue, and give me a second here. I think I lost the article I had up. Okay. Now you've heard about the guy that was arrested for speaking out at the school board meeting, and this one I seen come from the Blaze said bold 14-year-old girl confronts school board after watching her dad get arrested for violating 2-minute rule. I don't trust you. And let me see if I can get this audio clip here. Shouldn't take me too long. Luckily, it's been, actually, I don't know if you guys would be able to actually hear it if I play it from YouTube Direct, so just give me a second here. But, if you didn't see it, the father was simply questioning a book that these kids were getting that had extremely sexual content in it, and challenging, really the audacity of them to just, say, oh yeah, that's okay for a young kid, to make that decision before the parents. And apparently, previous years, parents were warned about it and they could, opt their kid out of it or not. This year, apparently, this did not happen. They just went ahead and said it's going to be, part of the curriculum. It's what we're going to do. Whether you like it or not, that's just what we're going to do. Okay. And it should play.
Open up public comment.
Yes. Hi, I'm Marina Bear. I'm the ninth grade at Gilbert. I just watched you
Could you put your address?
It's the same as my father's.
I know, but would you state it for the
93 Terrace Hill Road.
Thank you.
You are. I just watched my father get arrested because he broke the 2-minute rule at a Board of Education meeting. This just shows that you resort to force at the first turn of conflict, and I'm appalled. So I don't trust you, I haven't, and I honestly don't feel safe around you people. That's all.
I don't trust you. Breaking a 2-minute rule at a school board meeting, and he got arrested. School board meeting for parents to come in and bring up problems. That's your child. You pay them to educate your child through forced taxation, of course. Don't pay your voluntary tax and see, what happens. This is appalling in America. This is appalling anywhere, but especially somewhere that supposedly is supposed to be part of the free world. And I'm about tired of hearing people claim, we need back to the Constitution and, have a more democratic process. If you talk about mob rule, you kind of completely blow individuality out the door. People are like, oh, how can we rise up as a people against something? There's a way to do it without having to conform people. Let's take GMOs, for instance. If more of the people that say, well, we shouldn't have GMO crops. Well, why don't you become a farmer and start growing non-GMOs? Why don't groups of you get together and buy thousands and thousands of acres and do nothing but plant non-GMO stuff? Why don't you start your own, non-GMO seed collection and, be able to distribute to other farmers non-GMO seeds? Why don't we start transforming our farming back to its origins of, well, not a whole bunch of chemicals and genetically modified seeds? And, there was problems, believe me, with, our agriculture before, which helped to, produce the Dust Bowl. But those things were solvable. You come around Indiana, there's not open fields for, where you can see for 20 miles, there's lots of woods, little, sections of woods spotted all across the farmland. Why? Why is there, 5, 10 acres, 30 acres, no 10, no 2 acres, 5, 40 acres, 50 acres? Because it stops the wind. It doesn't erode the soil. The wind doesn't get kicking as hard as it could. There's ways that we've been able to fix problems that we have, the way we till the soil. But, of course, a lot of these companies would like you to believe that it's because they've genetically modified their seeds and gave you a whole bunch of chemicals. Not addressing the super weeds that you can't kill off with the chemicals. You could sit there and dig the root out and spray the chemical on the root and put it back in the ground and it'd still grow. If you want to solve the problem, you don't have to become some large group protesting and then going back home and expecting the farmers to plant something other than GMO. A lot of these farmers don't know that your protest even happened. You're protesting Monsanto. Well, I understand your hatred for Monsanto. Not exactly a company with the best track record with the average person. But the main thing is we have to be the solution. Can't just protest and tell someone, this is what you're going to do. That you're trying to play the same game that they're trying to play. We should have freedom, so you need to do what we're telling you to do. Well, no, you need to do what you're telling other people to do. What do? I grow non-GMO. And I don't have much property to grow a big garden or nothing, but I grow some here. Then I also buy a whole bunch of non-GMO seeds. And I give them to a buddy I have that has plenty of property to grow. And he loves to grow his own food. I provide enough seed that he can grow enough for me, him, some of our other friends, our family, and then he's able to save those seeds. So I introduce some other, plant into his crop every year. Like, here's some, try this, we'll see how this grows. And he's got different areas to plant different types of things. That way it grows in the best soil for that plant. And of course, rotating. He's got, one of my buddies had to move, but, the chickens that buddy had, went over to one of my other friends. And so, there's organic fed, chickens, great egg layers, geez, humongous eggs, not all vaccinated or hormones shot up or nothing like that. There's things that I do because I don't like non-GMOs. And whenever I get a chance, I get other people that want to grow a garden or, if they got a crop, I go, hey, here's some resources to get some non-GMO seeds. Might be a little more than maybe Monsanto, but guess what? You get to keep some of it and replant it the next year. Guess what? It's not genetically modified. What's genetically modified? It's where they go and splice insect DNA into the vegetable DNA or some other type of DNA into that DNA. They mess with the DNA, make it something different. Well, I don't want all that. Exactly. A lot of these people don't even know exactly what they're getting into. A lot of them are just, that's how they were grew up. You went down to the seed store, you got some seed, and you planted it. Well, you go down to most seed stores and they got your Monsanto or some other company that makes genetically modified seeds. And you just buy it and you plant it. A lot of people don't question it too much. We have to be the people that change it and educate. We're not going to do that by going down to Monsanto and marching. We're going to do that by going to the farmer and educating. Going to the farmer, giving them resources. And if you can afford it, go to the farmer and give them the seeds. And I'm telling you, it definitely makes a difference. And I'm not saying that, marches against Monsanto don't do any good. But I'm talking about actually changing what we're doing. And it starts with us. So if we're going to talk about it, we have to do it first. And that's something that, I try to do on everything I talk about as much as possible. If you look at my website, the advertisers I have on there, they're the affiliates. Those are companies I buy from. These are companies I do business with. I add them as a affiliate because they are a great resource. And I'm not going to pit someone up as an affiliate that I think what they're putting out is dangerous. Talking about dangerous, how about the police state? I was talking earlier, and the police state is out of control. You go on YouTube, you can find just beatings and, shootings and, just so much brutality from the police. Josie the Outlaw, Josie Wells, she has one out, and I should be able to find it here kind of quick, hopefully. Hopefully. Let me do it this way. There we go. She had a speech and she goes in the police state and she's been putting out some really great work. And the police state's something we need to change, and let me get this queued up. Okay. But she explains the police state and things we should do, solutions that we should be looking at. So I want to go ahead and get into this. So here we go.
That a lot of you are aware of a very serious, very dangerous, very fatal epidemic that has been spreading for the last couple decades in our country. And if you don't have YouTube, maybe you are not. But police brutality has become a very, very serious problem in our country. And in order to understand how to fix it, we first have to figure out exactly how the situation came to be. Now it's easy to focus all of our anger on the ones who are committing the violence. And that's normal, and that's a basic human reaction, and we should be doing that. But cops all over the country didn't wake up one day and just decide to start violently oppressing people. Injustice flows from the top down, and what we're seeing today is largely a result of the politicians wanting people to live in fear of the police and wanting the police brutality that causes people to blindly obey whatever arbitrary, oppressive legislation the politicians decide to enact. Now, while we definitely should be condemning the ones who are committing the violence and who are following the orders, the ones who are giving the orders should definitely not be let off the hook either, which most of us know, and that's why a lot of us, in an effort to fight tyranny and government abuses, turn to the political process for solutions, which this approach basically amounts to begging the government for freedom. And to me, that has two major flaws. One, it has a just a horrible track record for ever achieving true freedom. Second, it basically tells the politicians that we accept that we can only be free if and when they allow us to. Now, I don't know about anyone else. I can only speak for myself. But I don't need legislation to tell me exactly how free I can be. And a lot of people will ask, if we're not going to vote or petition or campaign, what alternatives do we have? What are we left with? Well, after a millennia of doing all of those things and never achieving freedom, the power we have now is resistance and disobedience, which can come in many different forms. It can come, some people will quietly and passively find ways to circumvent and avoid the powers that be and their laws. Some will perform civil disobedience, and some will forcibly resist. But there are many people who can't bring themselves to disobey at all. And this is because they've been thoroughly convinced that while it's okay to ask the politicians to change their laws, it's never okay to disobey them, no matter how immoral or ridiculous the law may be. And unfortunately, a lot of those men and women who refuse to disobey any law are walking around in blue uniforms with a false sense of authority. Now, a lot of police will try to pretend that their job is to protect and serve. It isn't. Their job is to forcibly control the rest of us in any way the politicians want them to. The politicians make up commands, call them laws, and their hired guns, which are law enforcers, will hurt anyone who is caught disobeying those laws. And police know this, and this is why a lot of times you'll hear them say, I don't make the law, I just enforce it, which implies that they are not to be held responsible because they're just doing as they're told and following orders. Well, that excuse was invalid when the Nazis used it, and it's invalid today. So, besides the fact that it's completely cowardly to not take responsibility for your own actions because someone else told you to do it. Now, I'm pretty sure the police would react a different way if they came across a common criminal who said, "Don't blame me for blaming that robbing that old lady. Some guy told me to do it, so take it up with him." They would probably react the same exact way that we should react when they use that excuse with us, which would be, you are responsible for your actions. Now, a lot of people make a distinction between police violence that is legal and police violence that is illegal. To me, that distinction is meaningless. If you violently assault someone who hasn't hurt or threatened another human being, that is immoral. Whether a politician wrote a law saying that you could do that or not. Legislation doesn't determine right from wrong. It never did, and it never will. If you use force only to stop aggressors from hurting you or another person, then that's completely legitimate and moral and noble. But again, if you initiate violence against an innocent human being, whether you wear a badge or not, or whether some politician, again, wrote a law telling you that that was okay or not, that's wrong. And it's going to take the good people in the world to stand up and put a stop to it. So how do we do that? Well, police are human beings, just like the rest of us. So we should definitely begin by trying to appeal to their reason and morality. We should try to persuade them to do the right thing, which includes disobeying immoral laws, immoral orders. However, such appeals only work on people who still have the ability to reason and judge right from wrong. Unfortunately, there's a lot of law enforcement these days who don't fit that description. Now, I'm not sure what those badges are made of, but it almost seems like once you put them on, it causes almost a sort of brain damage, where it makes someone incapable of thinking for themselves, of judging right from wrong, and it gives them a twisted, backward sense of reality. Now, not all cops are the same, and they shouldn't be treated the same. We don't have to go in yelling and screaming and erratic. But sorry. Now, if they can become polite, considerate, and rational, then of course we should also become polite, considerate, and rational. I'll be the first to admit I didn't always approach police officers this way. I've done my share of getting a little heated when I saw them, hurting other people or bullying other people or just basically violating other people's rights. But I now view that as less than effective. And while not every cop is the same, and some are less violent than others, I would think of a good cop as being someone who would stop a bad cop from hurting another person when he sees it happening. Unfortunately, we don't get to see that often. And this is not to say that all cops are inherently evil, not in any way. But as a whole, they definitely seem to act and just speak and act like any other street gang. In the event that a police officer with a conscience stands up and steps in or speaks out against violence being perpetrated by one of his fellow officers, he's usually ridiculed, ostracized, threatened, and intimidated. And if he's not outright terminated for doing the right thing and potentially making the department look bad, he's usually bullied into resignation. Which means the system as it stands right now, instead of weeding out the bad cops, is weeding out the good ones. And this reinforcement of bad behavior is not only perpetrated by individual officers, but by police unions and official policies put out by entire police departments. For example, Dallas issued a policy allowing police officers involved in shootings to say nothing for more than 72 hours after the incident, giving them time to review any video, any evidence, anything relating to the incident before they have to say anything or make a statement. Now, this comes after many, many Dallas police officers were caught lying in the act, in reports, and under oath. So the purpose of this policy is pretty clear. It's not to expose the truth. It is to hide the truth. And when the truth can't be covered up, usually police departments will just make excuses for it. And usually the police officer will get rewarded for it. When you hear about a police officer being suspended without pay, it means he's been given a paid vacation for his actions. If that's not positive reinforcement for bad behavior, I don't know what is. And your average cop, 9 times out of 10, knows that no matter what he does, he will be, whether it's good or bad, he will receive nothing but unconditional support by his peers and superiors. And this resulting us versus them mentality has been getting worse and worse, to the point where departments are now basically saying to the public, we not only find police abuse acceptable, we encourage it. And then people wonder why people dislike police officers and fear them and distrust them. So whenever you're dealing with the police, make sure you know what consequences to expect. Dealing with police can be like, I know this sounds extreme, but it can be like dealing with wild animals. They're unpredictable, as we've seen from thousands of videos. And I mean, this is just every day I scroll through my newsfeed and it's a new one, and not just the same old ones every single day. Now, it's important that you do, out of self-preservation, to just kind of maybe speak softly, move slowly. If you go in with arms waving and you look a little threatening, there's a good chance you could be attacked. So, like I said, just make sure you expect and you're cautious when dealing with police officers. And then again, even when you are calm and you are polite, like I said, a lot of agents of the state can be a little unpredictable, so it's important to be prepared. But there is an important distinction to be made here. On one hand, we should remain calm and polite unless they make things confrontational and violent. On the other hand, it would be a huge mistake to act as if their misconduct is okay with us. Remaining civil is always a good idea, whether it's because you're trying to win them over with logic and compassion, or just because you're trying to avoid being assaulted. But we should never act as if we think those shiny badges give them special rights and extra authority. In most cases, if they're doing something immoral, we can peacefully point out to them that they are the bad guys, that we don't view their actions as legitimate, and we don't view them as protectors, but as aggressors. And it may be uncomfortable, even scary to do this, but it is important that we make it uncomfortable for them to mindlessly follow orders. I wouldn't try to win them over by pretending that what they do is legitimate or just, or by condoning or making excuses for their actions. Our end goal is peaceful coexistence, an end to violent aggression. But if we're so eager to get along that we will condone and excuse oppression, then that's not doing anything for peace and justice. It's only reinforcing the idea in their heads that they're supposed to treat people this way. Now, there are a lot of practical suggestions about things to do or not do whenever you come face to face with someone with a badge. Most of you know these already, but it can be difficult to keep them in mind when you're under duress or being physically assaulted. First of all, never consent to searches or questioning. Always be recording police actions. And call attention to what's going on to gather as many witnesses as possible. And obviously witnesses with cameras are extremely valuable. But then there is the more uncomfortable question. When things get really bad, when someone is in the process of being beaten by police officers, or they're about to be shot, at what point do we put down the camera and take action? Now, I don't pretend to tell anyone where they should draw that line. And I myself have never been in the situation where I've seen someone being beaten. I myself have been in that situation before. And I know what I would want is for someone to step in and help. Just do something. So the best way, I mean, if you really want to think about it and you want to draw that line, and if you even want to consider it, just put yourself in that situation. and think, if there were a dozen people watching, what would you want them to do for you? And then do that. Or at least try to. But unless police know that we have such a line, they will assume they can get away with absolutely anything, including outright murder, as in the case of Kelly Thomas, when no one stepped in. And when you're watching all these examples of police brutality, it's easy to focus on that as the problem, when in reality, each individual case of police brutality is just a symptom of a much larger problem. And yes, the symptoms should definitely be treated, especially when someone's life is on the line. But we can't fix the problem until we identify and eliminate the disease, which is authoritarianism. And when it comes to the symptoms, there are many ways to create deterrence, which can be appealing to a cop's conscience, which is my choice action, shaming them, or scaring them away. Sometimes this can be accomplished with just words, but sometimes it takes equal and opposite force to stop the aggression of the agents of the state. But the ultimate solution is to end the mentality and the philosophy that makes these symptoms happen in the first place. The idea that legislation and badges and uniforms actually grant special authority and special rights to certain people, making it okay for them to forcibly control, extort, assault, and cage others who have harmed no one, that is the lie that has to go. Unfortunately, not only do most law enforcers believe this lie, but most of their victims and most of the general public believe that lie as well. Until we destroy that lie and help people to understand that no one person has the right to rule over another person, these symptoms are only going to get worse. Now, as long as people still believe that we need to be controlled and dominated by government, we will be controlled and dominated by government. But if we can get to the point and talk to enough people and help enough people understand that society can be and needs to be absolutely and truly free, then we will be absolutely and truly free. Now, I do want to end with a quick message to the people who wear the badges. And if anyone's here, you're more than welcome to ask questions or, have a word with me afterwards. You've probably noticed that more and more people distrust, fear, and hate the police, which just recently in the My NYPD backfire hashtag was just perfectly illustrated. Now, if you're a police officer, do you ever stop to wonder why people think this and feel this way? I know that if someone were talking about having to forcibly control me, I'd wonder why they felt that way and what I did to deserve that. I don't ever hear people talking about having to forcibly control plumbers or hairdressers or other people who perform a service. Why is that? If you really are here to protect people and perform a service, why are so many people preparing mentally and physically for a possible violent confrontation with you? You could choose to not do these things which will make people feel this way. Good people won't need to forcibly resist you if you choose not to inflict injustice on them in the first place. And saying it's your job doesn't make it okay. Your victims and their families will not feel any better just because you were doing your job. The fastest, most peaceful way for oppression to end is for agents of the state to refuse to commit it. Now, if you don't want to be called a fascist, don't be a fascist. Thank you.
was really excited to have the opportunity to volunteer for civil affairs.
Okay, that was Josie Wells, aka Josie the Outlaw. And, you know, it really is that simple. You know, you don't want to be called a tyrant. You don't want to be called, you know, fascist. You don't want to be called a commie. Don't act like one. Now there's people out there that are proud to be a commie. Those people are evident. They're right out there in the open. The most dangerous ones are the ones that think they're doing the right thing, don't think that they're fascist, but act in a fascist way and wonder why people call them fascist. They can't take a step back and look at themselves. Why are they calling me fascist? Could be because you just tackled a guy for smoking a joint and hit him and tased him and handcuffed him and stuck him in a cage. Or, you know, and now I'm not saying that people should be out there doing drugs. But what I'm saying is that people that are not hurting other people shouldn't be caged up like animals. Shouldn't be beat up. I know I tend to not want to be beat up for things that I might do that, you know, other people might disagree with. So I have to take that same thought and go, well, someone that's out there smoking a cigarette, smoking a joint, should they be beat up? No. Should they be caged up? No. What about the person that robbed someone? Did they steal someone else's property? Did they abridge someone else's right? Yeah. Well, there you go. Someone that killed someone. Yeah. They ended someone's life, their ability to exercise their rights, ability to pursue happiness, bridged all of that person's natural rights. So, yeah. There's a difference. But then when someone's doing something that you say, well, it'll harm them. Okay, you don't have to associate with that person. And, you know, people bring up drug tests. Well, if you have a company and you don't want someone like that, you don't have to, you shouldn't have to, you know, hire them. There's limits to things. You as a person shouldn't be forced to interact with someone that does something. Oh, that person smokes cigarettes. I hate being around cigarettes. Well, you shouldn't be forced to be around that person. But you shouldn't, at the same time, be able to force that person away from an area just because you decide, I want to be in this area. And it's a public area, but because you're in a public area, I don't like the smell of cigarettes. So even if you're not smoking near me, I can smell it and it's bad. It gets crazy. People think because you offend them, you do something that they disagree with in a public area, they have the right to say no. Now people can make the argument, you know, if you're getting secondhand smoke or whatever, but then what if it's a private establishment? You have a restaurant or a bar, and you want to allow smokers. They tend to be your best business because they stick around. Should you be forced to say, well, you can't smoke in here, someone else doesn't like it? Or should it be, hey, if you don't like smokers, I probably wouldn't come to my establishment. What are you doing then? Free market. You, as a non-smoker that doesn't like to be around smokers, can spend their money somewhere that doesn't allow smoking. And if you really look at it, the percentage of smokers compared to the percentage of non-smokers, there was already establishments before the smoking ban that didn't allow smoking. And they've done these bans everywhere, and it's just, it's getting to a point, you look at, what they're doing with the Clippers. I don't think the guy should own the Clippers. I think it's, personally, I think it's idiotic for someone like him to own the Clippers. If you don't want to put money in his pocket, don't go to a Clippers game. Well, that hurts the player. If the players don't want to play for him, they don't have to play on the Clippers. If someone else wants to build another stadium and start another basketball team, and all those team members go over to that team, all the sponsors go over to that team, that'd be a free market move. But no, they're talking about legislation. Or not legislation, but the NBA is talking about forcibly making him sell the Clippers. And all this BS you hear going on, it's on the mainstream. Who knows how true it all is. But basically they're pushing to say, oh yeah, we should force him to sell his Clippers. Because now you should be able to be forced to sell your company or not work because of your personal beliefs. This isn't about what he said or his beliefs. This is deeper than that. Because what happens if someone gets into office and, well, they don't like your belief system? Let's say your personal belief is you're pro-life, but you're when it comes to the public, you're pro-choice. You say, hey, I'm pro-life in my personal life, but I'm not going to tell someone what to do. That's not my business. But because you're personally pro-life, and someone leaks something that shows that should you be forced to sell? What if you're someone that is pro-choice and a person gets in office and they're pro-life? Well, you're pro-choice, you assist in murder, so therefore you shouldn't be able to own a company. Think how this spirals out of control. That's exactly what this is all going to do. And that's what they want to push for. It gives them more control. They can shut down opposition. It's unbelievable. And it seems like there's a lot of people out there that are going, yeah, that works. He's a bad guy anyways. Who cares? Who cares? Okay. Give me a second here. Wrong one. Okay, this one's on Next News Network. Whole Foods cover-up of toxic rice protein. And this, this is a thing that I talk about. The best way to fix this problem, with food and, genetically modified foods is, hey, maybe you should grow your own food. And, getting farmers also, I think, is a real good idea. So, let's go ahead and start this.
Are you getting...
Oh. Okay, I guess give me a second here. Because I don't think it's going to play. It's going to play this BS with me again. But don't worry, I have it covered. As long as this works. Pull up my conversion. Okay. It'll just take a minute here to download, hopefully. We always hope. YouTube, what I found out that there's something weird going on with YouTube. And I think they might have something with Microsoft going on. It's hard telling. It's hard telling anymore, but I know that, whenever I'm dialed into the network or, on Skype, all of a sudden YouTube videos, I can hear them in my headphones through the soundboard, but for some reason, they don't tend to want to play through the soundboard back into, Skype or whatever I'm using. Something that I was able to get around for a little while, but using my phone, and I play it through my phone, through the headphone jack into my board, and that worked for a while, but that's not working anymore either. It gets some weird, I don't even know what it is. It just gets that squealy noise, so. Okay. Right now I'm trying, I wanna, invest in a couple new machines and new board and try to get things running where I don't have all these issues. It's hard. I've barely been home all week, so seems like every step I take forward, I take 5 steps back, but that's okay because I keep on going on. I've had people ask me, how do you keep just doing this over and over? And it's because I care enough to do it. It's one of those things that someone's got to do it. So you just power on. Okay, here we go.
Are you getting enough iron in your diet? Well, China recently announced to the world that 1/5 of their farmlands are contaminated with heavy metal toxins. These include arsenic, cadmium, and lead. For several months, testing by the Natural News Forensic Food Lab has revealed these toxins in rice protein from China. In Michigan, small family farmers are in danger from a new state law allowing municipalities to ban any species of small animal from their territories, and this could result in common domestic farm animals like chickens or bees being banned around the state. Mike Adams leads naturalnews.com. He's an activist who became a scientist, and he's known to his fans as the Health Ranger. Apart from other activities, his organization conducts laboratory tests on foods, searching for contaminants. He's our guest on the show today. He's here to talk to us about the news from China and Michigan and how they both could affect your family. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Gary, for having me on. It's a pleasure to join you.
Mike, how serious is the contamination from the toxins in Chinese food products?
Well, it's very serious. This is a global health concern. It affects the health of American consumers who are eating the food, but also the unborn babies of pregnant women who are consuming these products. Now, remember that the Chinese government has now declassified a report that admits 20% of the farms in the country are heavily contaminated with toxic heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and even tungsten. This is huge because the U.S. is importing more and more foods, superfoods, herbs, food powders, powdered grasses, things that are sold in health food stores, things that are sold as organic. We're importing those literally by the container load every single day coming into the U.S. and being consumed by U.S. consumers. And no one is telling consumers the truth about the heavy metals in their food except just a very small number of organizations. Natural News, Consumer Lab covers it sometimes, and every once in a while Consumers Reports covers it as well. But that's it. The government's not saying anything.
So let me ask you about the root of the problem. Why are we importing food from China?
Well, yeah, the root of the problem is because you can't stay in business in the United States running a farm due to government regulations, but also Obamacare, healthcare costs. The costs of doing business in the U.S. are so prohibitive that it doesn't make economic sense for a lot of farmers to grow these products in the U.S., even when they can be grown here. So, for example, rice. You can grow rice in Texas, in Louisiana, in California, and it has traditionally been grown in these states for a very long time, over 100 years. But why don't we produce rice protein in America today? It's because it's cheaper to have it produced in China, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in these Asian nations where it is consistently contaminated with industrial heavy metals. And so the rice protein products that people are buying in America today are contaminated with these toxic substances, some of which have been linked to cancer and lowered IQs and kidney failure and bone disorders and depression and heart disease, all kinds of things. Why aren't we growing this in America? Because of the economic policies of the government.
So you mentioned some of the side effects of these heavy metals. How can people avoid ingesting these things or even know that the rice they're buying is or has been imported from China?
It's very difficult to know. This is a huge issue. Country of origin labeling is not required on nutritional products. For example, medicinal herbs, superfoods, not required. So you don't know where it's coming from. You can't see heavy metals. They're invisible to the human eye. You can't look at a product and see, oh, it's got lead in it. You can't tell. And sometimes the lead levels they seem low. They're only, let's say, half a part per million, but that's high enough to cause damage in a developing human body or a child. So you can't see it. The only way to know is to do your homework. You got to tune into organizations like us, Natural News. We're doing the testing. I run the lab, ICP-MS instrumentation, doing the analysis of these heavy metals. And we publish that information for free. But if you don't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you name some of the products that you've tested, some of the brands that you've tested?
Well, sure. If you look at rice protein, almost every brand of rice protein currently sold in the marketplace contains lead, cadmium, and tungsten. That's across the board, from Jarrow formulas to Garden of Life to Warrior Food to many other brands. I've tested ginkgo supplements, the ginkgo herb that's supposed to enhance your cognitive function. I found ginkgo imported from China that contain as much as 5 parts per million lead, whereas the ginkgo grown in the United States is virtually free of these heavy metals. For example, there's a company called Gaia Herbs. Their ginkgo is totally clean. I went to Whole Foods and bought ginkgo herbs there. Their ginkgo is mostly clean, but if you get it imported from China, it's very polluted. I bought rice in California made by the Lundberg Company. It's a family-run organic rice manufacturer, it tested virtually zero lead, virtually zero cadmium. But rice from China, we know, is typically contaminated. I've seen high cadmium levels in brown rice that's certified organic.
Is there a difference between rice and rice protein?
Yes. Protein is the extracted protein of rice. It's typically a byproduct of when rice is essentially rinsed and soaked and squeezed to make rice syrup, which is a sweetener, a natural sweetener. What's left over after that is a rice protein and some other constituents that have to be removed. But rice protein is really a byproduct of rice syrup manufacturing.
So what about government officials? Should they be responsible for sharing these health risks to the American public?
Well, I think so. Health Canada, for example, has set limits. You can't sell many of the products in Canada that are being sold in the United States today because of the high levels of lead and cadmium and arsenic and mercury. But the FDA has no regulatory limit. And even worse, Gary, the USDA has no limit on the levels of these metals that can be found in certified organic products. So you can be at Whole Foods, for example, buying a certified organic product, and in your mind as a consumer, you're thinking, oh, this is really clean. This is organic. It's the best of the best, right? Well, sometimes it's contaminated with heavy metals, and certified organic doesn't mean that it doesn't have heavy metals. In fact, the highest levels that we've found have been in organic products. And I'm not attacking organics. I'm a big supporter of organics, but it doesn't test for heavy metals, and organic foods can be grown on farms that are heavily contaminated with industrial heavy metals and still be certified organic. That's a fact that a lot of people don't know.
To domestic homesteaders in Michigan where species have been banned, Mike, how do these two stories connect?
Well, there's an assault on food freedom or the freedom to farm in America. Remember, America is a country that was really founded on farming and homesteading, and go out west and claim your acres and grow some food and survive and have a family. Well, that whole idea is under attack today by government officials, in this case in the state of Michigan. This is the same state whose DNR, Department of Natural Resources, previously had ordered a small farmer to shoot his own pigs based on racial discrimination. They said that his pigs weren't the right race of pigs and that he had to kill them all. And he fought that, and some of that battle is still going on. But now, more recently, the state of Michigan has passed a law, an ordinance, in essence, that would allow local cities and towns to ban backyard farming, to criminalize people who have chickens or goats or even honeybees in their own backyards if it's within, I think it's 500 feet of some other house. Now, what's
the driving force behind people being self-sufficient, or against people that want to be self-sufficient?
Well, it's a monopolization tactic for the centralization of the food industry. In the case of the farmer that was ordered to shoot his pigs, there was a lot of pressure from the pork industry that didn't want backyard farmers to be able to compete with centralized big pork factories, essentially. And the same thing is going on with chickens and chicken eggs and goat's milk and honeybees and honey production. There's this push to centralize everything, which is bad for national security. It's bad for food security. It's bad for America. Because think about it. What if there's a problem with a centralized food system? What if there's a fuel shortage? What if there's an EMP attack that takes down the power grid? You need food to be decentralized across urban and rural areas to have a strong nation. That's what Russia does. That's what Cuba does. You know, it's funny that the communist nations kind of get this idea of food decentralization. But America has declared a war, essentially, on backyard farmers and gardeners. And even gardeners like Julie Bass, also from Michigan. She was threatened with jail time for growing vegetables in a garden in her own front yard. Threatened with jail. It's extraordinary.
Mike, why are the legislators jumping on these laws and criminalizing gardeners and homesteaders? Who are the lobbying forces here specifically?
Well, big industry, big ag, the agricultural giants. I don't have to name names. You know who they are. The big seed companies, the big meat producing companies, just the big food supply companies that really dominate the entire landscape of food in America. They're the ones who apply the pressure, and they make billions of dollars a year. They can certainly spend money on lobbyists to force this further centralization or a monopolization, you might say, of the food supply. And again, who loses in this is the American people.
What about exotic pets? Could this law affect household animals as well?
Well, I don't think so. It's specifically written to cover backyard farming type of operations, livestock, chickens, goats, even cattle, that kind of thing. I don't think it applies to family pets, but you never know how they're going to misappropriate the language to do whatever they want. They could say it means something else. You never know.
Now, you mentioned honeybees. Could the local ban on honeybees compound the problem of pollinating across a large swath of property where bees are needed to continue the life cycle of plants?
Absolutely. Right now, we are suffering a honeybee pollinator collapse in North America, where over the last couple of winters, about 1/3 of the honeybee populations were lost. They died. We are really on the verge of a true crisis in terms of the loss of pollinators, and it is these pollinators that provide indirectly 1/3 of all the food that you eat when you sit down for lunch or dinner. 1/3 of that food comes from pollinators, or the plants that are pollinated by pollinators, to be more specific. So, to destroy this opportunity for Americans to have honeybees, which are valuable pollinators, is to really destroy the food supply viability. And so it's a very short-sighted decision. It's anti-American, it's anti-freedom, it's anti-farming. It's a disaster. And let's hope it can be reversed.
Mike, what can private individuals and families do to combat these types of laws and simply ensure that they have food for their family and have a healthy food supply?
Well, number one is to practice backyard gardening and farming. So exercise your rights. Grow some of your own food, at least 10% of your diet, if not more. So practice this. Use heirloom seeds and practice seed saving. And have some backyard chickens. I have backyard chickens. We raise our own eggs. And they're, the best eggs you'll ever find because they're free-range chickens. So exercise your rights and resist these attempts to oppress families and American values and food production, self-reliant living. So sometimes you got to go down to City Hall. You got to raise a stink about it. You got to protest. But these are God-given rights that I believe should never be allowed to be stripped from any American. The right to pursue happiness encompasses the right to farm and grow your own food. So it's really the fabric of our nation.
And he's basically saying what I was saying. We need to start growing our own foods. And what's going on up in Michigan, which is just a state north of me, not too far from me actually, is really sad. DNR up there is basically acting like the BLM is out in Nevada. Those are two agencies that should be, how do I say, that basically nullified. BLM, all these federal land management, EPA, they're basically a land management. The locals need to be in charge of their land management. Not some corporate shill that's now working in a governmental bureaucracy going, I used to work for Monsanto. We'll go ahead and make sure that they get all the approval and the rulings that they need. But the little guy, oh no. People up in Michigan, they all should go out and get chickens. Every damn one of them. Get some bees. Grow a garden. Get a cow. Get a goat. Get something. Everybody up in there. Up in Michigan. They all need to go out and get something. Mass civil disobedience. You all don't need to get together and go march. What would even be more effective is you all go out and get chickens. Go get some pigs. Find that farmer that has that breed of pig. Go get some piglets from him. That's what people need to do. Then they also need to push for nullification. You need to take back the authority over your own property in the community, the states. And I know the DNRs are supposed to be ran by the state. You know, you got your state DNR, but a lot of times they're federally funded. And they have to go by whatever stipulations that were put forth for them to get that funding. And when you have the federal government agencies pushing for this Agenda 21 and bowing down to people that want to control you, well then, you know, you need to cut that funding. You need to take control over your DNR. All of this. And I seen someone in chat talk about, yeah, don't defend yourself when a deer attacks when it's out of season. And you know, that's the thing. It's just out of control. It has nothing to do with you. And again, where do you think a lot of this stuff is starting? It's starting with the youth. And like, you know, I was saying, the first elementary school I was in, before I moved, it was a magnet school for earth science. It pushed that type of mentality on people. Of course, I was always someone to question things, but I was also someone that liked the outdoors, had a green thumb. I like that type of stuff. I always have. I'd rather be outside and enjoying nature. But I know that these bureaucratic agencies, they're not better at managing land or resources. What they're good at is taking your right away to those resources, those natural, you know, public lands. They take control of it, kick you out, and then allow a corporation that has a whole bunch of money come pay them to extract all the resources and sell it back to you. You know, just go look up blue gold. Go find out what blue gold is. And you'll understand what's really going on. Okay. How much time we got here? Let me see if I can find this one real quick. It was only like a 5-minute, I think. If I don't see it here in a minute, then I'll skip that. Okay, it's 6 minutes. I'm going to attempt to play this from YouTube. I'll toss in my earbud and see if it's playing through the network. If not, I'll just give up on it. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, here we go.
Agenda 21. The constitutionalist movement has heard vague echoes in recent years about a threat to the free economy from this Agenda 21. Well, Agenda 21 is not new. The New American Magazine and its affiliate, the John Birch Society, were one of the few constitutionalist organizations that was present when it was drawn up back at the 1992 Earth Summit on Climate Change in Rio de Janeiro. The summit, organized by the United Nations, brought together the most extreme environmental activists from around the world to deal with the supposed threat from global warming. And Agenda 21 was the document they drew up. The New American's William F. Jasper attended the conference as a reporter and was able to report on events at the Rio Summit as they happened. And he's been reporting on them for some 20 years ever since, including the Wildlands Project, which would take most of America outside of the habitable zone for human beings in order to make room for the animals. What came out of this Rio Summit in 1992 was summed up by the radical environmentalists themselves. And one United Nations approved introduction to the Agenda 21 document claimed that, quote, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both government and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action to be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. The document leaves no one alone, stating, quote, there are specific actions which are intended to be undertaken by, in short, every person on Earth. What it means for Americans is more than just an end to fossil fuels. It means a lower standard of living. And the strategy for implementing Agenda 21 was a much broader strategy than ever attempted by the environmentalist movement. They sought global treaties and national legislation, as in the past. They also sought to shame individuals and corporations into changing their behavior on a voluntary basis. That, too, was not new. But they also began fighting for what's called soft law changes to consumers' living standards. Soft law is the use of centralized governments to bribe with aid or regulations either smaller governmental subunits, such as states and localities, or private companies for following ever more stringent eco-standards with tax breaks or outright cash aid. On the state and local level, the push for soft law is led by the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, or ICLEI, which had been founded a couple of years before the Rio Summit. More than 1,000 state, county, and municipal government organizations around the world are ICLEI members and are pushing this radical environmentalist agenda with bribes and stiffer regulations. In many American towns, local officials boast about the impact of ICLEI in the form of putting state rebate checks on display for properly following new environmentalist incentives. For example, John Birch Society New England Regional Director Hal Shurtleff was able to point out that
here is what's disturbing. Here is a check made out to the city of Newburyport from Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And why is this check on display? Well, this is the second such check that I have found in a city or a town that belongs to the ICLEI, International Council on Local Environmental Initiative, which is a government-to-government entity, unconstitutional on its face, and their goal is to implement Agenda 21, what they call soft law, that came out of the Rio Conference in 1992. Very hostile to property rights, freedoms, and And any town or city official who thinks somehow being part of this is going to help the communities is gravely mistaken.
ICLEI has become a big part of the subsidy and regulation regime on the state and local level, but it's not the only part of the eco-subsidy agenda. That also extends to the White House, where President Obama has called for government to start picking winners and losers in the markets for more energy-efficient products. President Obama boasted in his May 6, 2011 weekly address that,
but over the long term, the only way we can avoid being held hostage to the ups and downs of oil prices is if we reduce our dependence on oil. That means investing in clean, alternative sources of energy, like advanced biofuels and natural gas. And that means making cars and trucks and buses that use less oil. Other countries know this, and they're going all in to invest in clean energy technologies and clean energy.
Electric were able to claim a $3.25 billion tax credit in 2010, paying no corporate income taxes that year. GE cashed in on federal tax credits for green projects, such as its wind turbine project. Of course, nobody objects to private companies offering more fuel-efficient automobiles or creating products that don't fill up landfills. The problem with ICLEI and Agenda 21 is that they primarily seek governments to pick the winners and the losers in the marketplace. Governments usually pick the wrong winners. That was the lesson from the housing bubble of the last decade. The federal government promoted home ownership by subsidies, tax credits, and suppression of interest rates, and crashed the whole economy. Government doing the same thing on green jobs will do the same thing to the economy on a much larger scale.
And that was from Liberty News Network on YouTube. And for anybody out there that has followed my old YouTube, which was user / actually I can't even remember now. But it was Josh, Anti-Tyranny News. That one I'm not going to be using anymore. That's one that I had a lot of documentaries on. You could still go there and watch, well, most of the documentaries. Endgame is blocked in the U.S. What in the World Are They Spraying is blocked worldwide now. There's a lot of BS going on with that YouTube channel. YouTube's going nuts. Facebook's going nuts. They're really, clamping down on the liberty movement. Go to youtube.com/Anti-Tyranny News. I've actually had this channel created, but I haven't posted anything on it. But go ahead and subscribe to that. That's youtube.com/Anti-Tyranny News, all one word. Any of the new projects I do will be posted on there, which I plan on doing this summer. I have a lot of stuff that I'm trying to deal with right now, so it's going to be a little while before I get anything up there, but definitely subscribe to that. But that was a kind of a short explanation of Agenda 21. And I've said this multiple times that I watch Agenda 21, being carried out near me. And one place that, not one place, multiple places that I know it's being carried out is something that it was talked about a long time ago, but now you're starting to see it at a lot of places. And something that one of the cities nearby has had was trails that you could walk, and bike trails, just, in the city around the rivers and, whatnot. But through a lot of this funding, they kind of had to go ahead and sign on to this little thing called, I forget what they're calling it, but it's connecting trails for multiple cities. And it's done by this green collective that's part of a world organization that's somehow connected to Agenda 21 in the United Nations. And it's all being done with your taxpayer money. And by the way, if that bike path, walk path that's actually connecting the city with a whole bunch of towns and different counties within the state up here, if your property's near it, you're going to have to clean up your property. Your property's in a wetlands area, so you really can't do anything with your property, by the way. Just make sure any grass is mowed. But you're not allowed to cut down any trees. If a tree starts falling down, it's part of nature. You gotta let it fall down. I know it's in your yard, but no, you can't dispose of it. You gotta let it naturally dispose. And it's just, they're pushing people off the property because most people are like, I can't do anything on my property. I bought this house, bought this property, I got 2 acres, I wanted to have a garden, I can't do anything with my property. They're trying to say it's part of wetlands or it's the part of the watershed. That's what they like to call it, the watershed. And they're basically causing people to say, well, I have to go seek land somewhere else that I can actually do something with. The problem with that is, well, eventually they're going to put another walk path in somewhere. Why? Because they have as much funds as they need. They're taking the money out of your pocket. What's their end game? Well, they want people in cities. They want people condensed. They want nature to be open and only accessible to the people they allow. Kind of reminds me of Hunger Games, Everything's wild. They got these shack towns that are districts that they have forced labor to pull the natural resources out of the ground. You have your coal mining town and, natural gas or oil town or whatever. But all the people that aren't basically slaves are in the city. You don't go out to nature. You got this beautiful city with all this extravagant stuff, which, honestly, I see the future as Hunger Games because it seems like these people that are making the rules are more obsessed with appearance than reality. They don't care what the reality is as long as you can make it look a certain way. They're in a fantasy world. But, if you want to be an obedient slave, move to the city and follow whatever rules they have and abridge other people's rights and take other people's rights away and just go along with the game, you'll be okay. But if you actually want to live free, well, they're trying to fight you on every front. Eventually, we will beat this. Hopefully sooner than later, and we start reversing the trend that we're on. And again, it starts with the youth. Educate your kids, don't let them brainwash them. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV for the Room Radio with Jim Funky.